I was 17 at the time, and I had just gotten my first job. I lived in rural West Virginia in a small mountain community. My mom's friend owned a camping resort not far from my house that had a general store, and she said she'd pay me to help out in the store during the busy months in the summer. It was a pretty easy job, and I met a lot of out-of-towners, which was nice because our community could get so isolated. Most of us lived pretty far away from each other. One day, a big burly mountain man type came into the store. He was in his late 40s or early 50s, probably 6'5", and about 280 pounds. He looked dirty, like he worked outside a lot. His clothes were sort of tattered and he had a long beard. But we had a few of the woodsy hermit types in the area, and he definitely looked like one of them. He bought some basic items, one of which was one of our homemade bars of soap. When he came to the register, he looked me up and down carefully. He didn't talk for a minute, just stared. His people skills clearly needed work. "Did you make this soap?" he asked gruffly. "Possibly," I said. "I help out with that sometimes." "You make a lot of your own stuff?" "Toiletries and things like that, yeah," I said. "I like that," he said, nodding to himself. I honestly did not know how to respond. I quickly rang up his items and he paid with crumpled money. Right before he left, he asked, "You cook too?" "Sometimes," I replied. "Bet the boys around here are itching to marry you," he said as he smiled to himself. I said nothing. I was puzzled as to what I said that stood out as wife material. I told my boss Krista about the bizarre encounter and she laughed it off. So did my family and friends. But then, Mountain Man started turning up more often. We chatted a little bit here and there, and I found out he had a cabin in the woods. He claimed he built with his bare hands. He said he hunted and lived off the land, other than the things he bought at the store. Over time, our chatter escalated, with him making comments about how nice it would be to have a woman like me around who could make those things and cook his kills. One time, he even said that I had the birthin' hips that men lust after. He even started inviting me to fish with him, hunt with him, see his place, etc. And I always politely declined. But he got more and more insistent, and I told Krista about how uncomfortable he was starting to make me. The intensity with which he said those things really scared me. She said that when he came in, go get her and she would ring him up. Thanks to her, I started speaking to him less, and I thought I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. But one night, I was closing up, and it was late, around 10 at night. Krista had left about an hour before, and I was leaving by myself. The only two cars in front of the store were an old blue pickup and mine. I was immediately alarmed because I knew Mountain Man drove a blue pickup, but I didn't see him in the parking lot, just his car. So I walked quickly to my car and checked the back seat before I started her up. But then, when I first turned the key into the ignition, I got nothing but sputters. I tried several more times and got scared quickly. Of all nights, why is this happening tonight? I remember asking myself angrily. Just as I were reaching for my phone to call for help, there was a loud pounding on the driver's side window. I'm shocked that I didn't piss myself. I didn't even want to look because I knew it was him. But I did, and my suspicions were confirmed. He smiled a big grin at me, showing me exactly which teeth were missing. "Need some help?" he said loudly through the window. I shook my head furiously. "My dad is on his way," I said, hoping to scare him off. I hadn't spoken to my dad in years. Mountain Man laughed. "No, he's not," he said. "Open the door." The hairs on my neck stood straight up. How did he know I was bluffing? "No," I said firmly. "Leave me alone." Suddenly, he looked angry. He pulled the handle, but I had locked all the doors when I first got in. He kept furiously pulling the handle and started pounding on the window. "Leave now, or I'm calling the cops," I screamed at him. He clearly wasn't getting the message, so I pulled out my phone and called 911. I must have sounded hysterical to the dispatcher, and I knew she could hear him pounding. She said she would have officers out ASAP, but out here, that could be a while. "The cops are on their way. Leave now," I screamed at him. It didn't deter him. But after a few more minutes of pounding, he suddenly stopped and walked back to his truck. I watched him go, hopeful he would leave me alone. But then, he started walking back toward me with a crowbar in hand. "No!" I screamed at him. "Get away from me!" He started swinging at the driver's side window with the crowbar. I ducked down into the passenger seat on the floor and covered the back of my neck like they teach you in tornado drills. I heard the sickening crack of the window, but not for long. Suddenly, I heard a male voice shouting, telling him to get away from the car. I sat up and saw two men approaching, one with a shotgun pointed at him. I recognized them as a couple of guests staying at the resort for a camping trip. I breathed a sigh of relief and got out of the car, telling them that the police were on the way. I thanked them profusely as we waited for the police, and surprisingly, he didn't make any moves to get away. But the cops came pretty quickly after that, so he didn't have much of a chance. They took him away and I gave them my statement. I was pretty shaken up for a while afterwards. A few weeks later, I finally got the scoop on the man. Apparently, he had a history of mental illness. He had been in and out of state institutions. He really had been living in an old cabin in the woods where he wasn't taking his meds and his issues were only getting worse. My cousin is a cop, and later on, he told me some more about the case that he had heard through some other officers. The police did a search of the cabin after the incident to see if there was anything that might be of interest to them. They found a journal that he kept. Apparently, in it, he said he was lonely and wanted a wife. He mentioned me by name a lot, and my cousin said there were a lot of lewd things in there about me that he didn't want to share, but tried to put it simply by saying that he had a detailed plan to abduct me, starting with sabotaging my car engine to get me into a vulnerable position. When my cousin said that, I nearly burst into tears thinking about how horribly that night could have gone if those two men hadn't come along. This happened in January, a year and a half ago, on a cold and wintry Friday morning when I was on my way to work. I had a rough start that day, waking up in a panic as I realized I'd been hitting snooze on my phone alarms for the last hour. Apparently, as soon as my phone vibrated, I would hit the side button to silence it. I had already worked long hours from Monday to Thursday, and I had just found out I was pregnant the week before, so I was more tired than usual. This behavior was very unlike me as I am always on time for work. I did not usually work on Fridays, but once a year we had a mandatory training for all our staff members, which I could not miss or be extremely late for. I quickly threw on some clothes, tied my hair up into a ponytail, brushed my teeth, and headed out. I had only 25 minutes until I had to be there, so I did not even let my car warm up. As I pulled out of my driveway, I remember thinking that my dad would kill me if he knew because he always preached about the importance of letting the car warm up. I finally got out of the neighborhood, hit the highway, and noticed that my gas light was on, which was another annoyance that would cut into my time. However, I decided that I would stop once I got off on the exit as I had a few minutes to spare. I pulled my car up to the pump and turned it off, hopped out into the freezing cold to get the gas started, and quickly jumped back in. There was a guy pumping gas into his work truck right in front of me, but I did not pay him much mind. Those trucks were everywhere near my workplace at that time, as it was near the river where all the bridge construction was going on. While texting my friend from work, I had a feeling someone was looking at me. I looked up and made eye contact with the work truck guy. He quickly looked away as I heard the gas click off. I got back out to finish, did not think anything else about it, and then hopped back in my car ready to get to work. At this point, I probably had about 5 minutes left, which would have been plenty considering the proximity. I pressed the start button. Shit, I thought as I did it again, only to hear the same sound. What do you know? My car won't start. The battery was dead. And for the second time that morning, I thought of my dad and his advice. I tried for a third time, hoping it would work, but it was no use. The guy in the work truck noticed at this point. He started to make his way towards me, so I stepped out of my car. He asked me if I was having car trouble, and I told him that I thought my battery was dead. He told me that he could help me, but that he did not have jumper cables in this particular truck. However, he worked right down the road and was on one of the bridge crews, just as I had assumed, and had a set there. He said he would run to get them and come right back. I told him that he did not have to do that, but he said he did not mind at all. I thought about it for a second. My husband was at home, already asleep at this point, as he worked the night shift, and I did not want to wake him up if there was no need. Also, my dad was already at his job. I remembered thinking that he probably had a kid my age somewhere, one who would hope someone would help in this type of situation one day. I thought he was probably just a father trying to help, so I said okay and thanked him for his help. He said no problem, that he would be back in a couple of minutes and left to get the jumper cables. I usually had a set in my car, but I had loaned them to my brother the week before and he hadn't returned them yet. As I waited, I called my boss to let her know what was going on and that I would be in as soon as possible. She offered to send someone out there to help, but I told her about the work truck guy and that I would call her back if this didn't work. By the time I hung up, he was back with the cables, and we got my car started back up again. We let it run for a few minutes and made small talk, which was of little importance, like typical strangers do when they're trying to fill the silence. It was during this time that he asked me if I was a nurse. Immediately, I was alarmed because I wasn't wearing any scrubs. I think he could see the shock on my face because he quickly said that he noticed my license plate when he was pulling back in. I laughed in relief and slight embarrassment as I remembered that my license plate was, in fact, one of the state-issued nursing ones, and replied that yes, I was a nurse and that I was actually running late for work. He asked if I worked at the hospital up the road, to which I replied that no, I did not. Now, he was the one who looked confused, because where else would a nurse work, right? I didn't want to give too much away. I'm still a woman, I watch the news, but I felt a little uncomfortable with the questions, but I didn't want to be rude. So I said, "Oh, I work at a facility not too far from here," and left it at that. I mentioned again how I was running late and he unhooked the jumper cables. I thanked him again, and we both got in our vehicles and drove away. I let him pull out first, and then I proceeded to take a roundabout way to work, just in case he was watching. I felt kind of silly, but you never know, right? Finally, I got to work and jumped straight into the training. I honestly didn't think about what happened that morning again, except here and there when my coworkers asked a few questions in the break room during lunch. The long day finally came to an end, and we all headed out. As I walked towards my car, I saw a piece of paper shoved down into the driver's side window. I stood there and looked at it for a second, thinking of the guy from that morning, and then glanced around the parking lot. I didn't see anything unusual and reminded myself that he didn't know where I worked. I laughed at myself for being so paranoid because it was probably a note from my best friend, who actually worked at the hospital a few blocks over. We occasionally left each other notes if we saw each other's cars as we drove by. I started it back when she was going through a rough time the year before, and it just became our thing. As you can guess, the note wasn't from her. It was from the work truck guy from that morning. I don't remember it all word for word, but most of it I know I'll never forget. It made my skin crawl and thoroughly freaked me out. It listed his phone number at the top with an arrow pointing to it that said, "Call soon, love." It said that he felt we had this connection, one of two souls, and that he wanted to continue getting to know me. He knew the reason why he was at that gas pump in front of me that morning was so that he could find me, because the Lord knows he had been searching for me for so many years now. He couldn't just let me slip away. We couldn't ignore fate like that. No, not when it had been made as clear as it was that morning. I dropped that piece of paper like it was on fire. I felt my heart drop with all the panic and paranoia that came after reading it. I was so freaked out that I immediately called my mom, my dad, and my husband. I didn't want to drive home. What if he followed me? Did he not see my wedding ring? How did he even find out where I worked? He literally had to have driven through about 20 other medical facility parking lots just to find my car, because I watched him drive off in the other direction and never saw him turn around in my rear view. Trust me, I was watching. My work building was kind of hard to find too, with it being very off the main road on a side street, especially for a man that lived a couple of hours north from here, as he told me earlier during our small talk. He wouldn't have been familiar with the surrounding area enough to just come upon my car like that. After that incident, I avoided walking alone to and from work for months, only venturing out after the bridge was completed. Since I arrived at work during the nighttime and left during that time for part of the year, I refused to cross the dark parking lot by myself. Although I never saw him again, I still felt as though someone was watching me at random times, and that feeling of paranoia stuck with me. This happened about 3 years ago, but I still think about it every now and then when I walk home and no one is around. I volunteered at a school in a rural area about 3 miles from my home. I didn't know how to drive and had an irrational fear of biking, so I didn't mind walking home every Wednesday. I was 19 at the time, but I looked at least 3 years younger due to my short stature, round face, big eyes, and no makeup. It was winter, and it was cold and raining, and I had no umbrella. However, I enjoyed walking in the rain with music blasting through my earphones. As I walked, I saw something in my peripheral vision that I was always scared to see in a situation like this. A car slowed down and started following me. I didn't know what to do, so I tried not to assume the worst. I turned to see if there were any potential witnesses in case something happened, but there was no one else around as far as my eyes could see. The driver lowered his window, and I saw his face. An old man who seemed to take care of himself, unfortunately not weak-looking, with his eyes fixed on me. He asked, "Where are you going? Would you like me to take you somewhere?" I took off one earphone and said, "Huh?" I had heard him because at that point, I had already turned down the music to be more aware of my surroundings. Plus, despite not wanting to assume the worst, I still wanted to buy some time to think of an escape plan. I wondered where I could run, if someone could hear me if I screamed, or if anyone else could see us. However, there was no one around and nowhere to run or hide. I was walking in a rural area on the side of the road that had a field on one side and woods on the other. There was only one abandoned house up ahead. So, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe the man was just concerned that I was visibly walking a long distance, right? I replied, "Oh, no thanks, I'm fine. I like walking." He said, "Oh, no, I don't care about that. I just want you to get in the car." I thought, what? Maybe he's concerned it's raining and I don't have an umbrella? "No, I don't care. I just want you to get in the car. I'll drive you where you need to go." Oh my God, really? I was giving that potential kidnapper 2 excuses, and he didn't take them. His intentions were becoming clearer and clearer, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. He never broke eye contact with me, analyzing my every move and reaction. I started to notice that his smile was becoming more sinister too. Was it just my fear tricking me? Throughout the whole time, I tried to look as friendly and naive as possible, so he wouldn't realize that he couldn't trick me into getting into his car, and his only choice would be to use force. I kept reminding myself that no one could hear me if I screamed. The man asked, "Listen, I just want to talk to you. Can I?" I hesitantly responded, Well, okay. What is it?" He clarified, No, I mean, I want to talk to you properly. Get in the car, I just want to talk to you." That was the only moment when he broke eye contact with me, slowly looking me up and down. He then suggested, "Well, you know what? How about I park a little bit further and you can join me to have a chat?" I nervously replied, Sure. I don't know if you'll find a place to park anywhere close, but go ahead if you want, sir. I'm only walking straight anyway." The man smiled and said, "Perfect. See you there." I forced a smile and replied, "Yes, sir." He smiled and drove away. I waited until his car was far enough away that he couldn't see me, and then I immediately ran towards the abandoned house to hide while I called my mom to come get me. The police wouldn't do anything because I wasn't in immediate danger. We had already called them once before when we received serious threats from a stalker, but they told us to only call them if the stalker was on our property. I explained everything to my mom, and she told me to send her a screenshot of Google Maps with my exact location, just in case something happened. She also told me to stay hidden and keep an eye on the road to see if the man's car appeared again. As I was about to end the call, I saw his car drive by again. He was looking right at me, as if he already knew exactly where I was hiding. He waved at me with a smile on his face, still with this trying very hard to seem friendly vibe. He knew I was hiding and on a call with someone now. He knew I wasn't as naive as I pretended to be. Then, he just drove away. My mom was still on the phone with me, so I told her what just happened. She told me to stay calm and wait for her. We ended the call, and I waited. He didn't come back again. My mom's car appeared much faster than I anticipated. I got in, and we went home. I still can't wrap my head around what exactly happened and what could have happened.